Who here has been to a job interview? Who here has walked out of a job interview going, oh man, that could have been a lot better? Anybody? Me too. Mr. Chair, fellow Toastmasters, and guest. Today I want to talk to you about the art of acing the interview. The interview is not as simple as it may first appear. There's really an eloquence to having a fantastic interview. Now, the first thing that I tell everyone to do is to get prepared. So I'm going to talk to you about what you can do to get prepared for your interview. The first thing you're going to want to do is a little bit of research. Who is the company you want to apply for? What is the role you're applying for? And a little bit about the company culture, about what's important to that company, and why it resonates with you. It is super important that we're not just applying randomly, but that we find something that we're passionate about, that we can resonate with, because ultimately that's what will make our work successful. So take some time and do a deep dive on the companies you're about to apply for. You also may want to go and take a look at the role specifically, maybe not at that organization, but that same job title, and look at it on several other different postings and see what might be listed there versus the one you're applying for. The reason for this is because there may be things that will be included in your role that you're not aware of, but other roles list that responsibility and requirement. So when you come prepared to that interview, you have the ability to say, hey, I can also perform these tasks and I have these skills that they may not have expressly said that they needed, but you already have an idea of what that role entails. And hey, if it doesn't apply to the role you're applying for, it's just another added bonus. The next thing I tell everyone to do is to set your intention. It's really, really important that when you go into an interview, you should have a very clear intention of what you want out of that interview. Example, salary, vacation time, expectations, and also intention of how you are going to express yourself and how you'd like that interview to go. When you have intention, it becomes a lot more, I would say, direct to be able to have that conversation and to pilot it in a way that you want it to go. The next thing is really important too, and it's looking the part. When you go into an interview at a mechanic shop, jeans and a t-shirt may be totally acceptable. But if you're applying to work at a law firm, I wouldn't recommend going in your jeans and t-shirt. So understanding the company, their culture, and what their expectations are for their dress code is extremely important. But we're in the 21st century here. Sometimes they don't even happen in person anymore. So remember, if you're doing an interview on Zoom, you want to make sure that your space is set up to reflect the type of interview you're having. If it's a higher end professional role, make sure you have a clean space, good lighting, good audio and camera setup so that you can put your best foot forward for that interview. And make sure you still dress the part. Whether you're doing it in person or online, you want to make sure you are looking like you're there for the role that you're applying for. Last but not least, make sure you have questions prepared. I actually did a lot as an HR hiring manager for a while. And one of the things I was absolutely astonished by is how many people don't have questions after the interview. I would ask all my questions and at the end, open the floor to them, and normally radio silence. And I think that this is a huge missed opportunity. This is the opportunity for somebody to explore what the company culture is like, what the benefits are like, what opportunities for advancements there are. But if you don't ask the questions, how do you know what you're getting yourself into? So make sure you have all of those questions prepared before you head in. And lastly, make sure you practice, practice, practice before you walk in. Because practice, anybody? Makes perfect. Thank you, thank you. So it's sometimes a little bit difficult to practice for what are they going to ask you? How do you know how to answer the questions if you don't know what the questions are? Well, we can never know for certain, but there are a fair few that tend to be universal depending on where you're applying that carry over job after job after job. The first question that someone's going to ask you is, tell me a bit about yourself. Have you guys been asked that in an interview before? Yeah? Did you have a good answer for it? Yeah? Okay. So before you go into that interview, you should have basically a sales pitch about you, because that's what you're doing. You're coming into this organization and you're selling yourself. Why am I the best candidate? Why am I the one you need in that chair? So having a prepared sales pitch of why you want to be in this role, what skills you bring to the table, and how you expect to benefit the company is a great way to walk into that interview and ace it right off the bat. Another frequent question we get asked is, what experience do you have? Now, I'd like to point out that it does not have to just be your work experience. What volunteer experience do you have? What education do you have? For example, what are we doing right now that could look really good on a resume and even better in an interview? Toastmasters, right? Right? So have an idea of what you bring to that table and what experience you have. The next question, and this is one that when I was doing interviews a lot of the time, people didn't really think about, and it was to go back and explain gaps in your work history. As a hiring manager, I used to look at things, and if I saw 2-3 year gaps within people's timelines for their work history, or people switching jobs very, very quickly, these were typically red flags, but not deal breakers. Having a clear explanation for why your history, your job timeline looks the way it does is really important, especially if you have large gaps or positions that you kind of change from really, really quickly. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with that, but being able to say, okay, hey, this is where I was, I was on maternity leave, or I was on medical leave from a surgery, or I was working on some education. Being able to have those answers will help ease those questions in that hiring manager's mind. The last question that I'm going to go over, which has slipped my mind, is what are your weaknesses? This is a really good opportunity to go through areas where you might have struggled, but not focus on that area, but how you are working to improve it. For example, one area that I used to always say for my weakness is I have problems with speaking in front of large crowds. Now, if I were to go to an interview, I could say one of my weaknesses is speaking in front of large crowds, but I'm currently part of 2 Toastmasters clubs in order to get better at my public speaking. Having clear ways of answering the questions, even if you don't know what they will all be, will help you really nail that interview. And last but not least, before you leave that interview, make sure you get the information on when you should follow up and then leave with a smile, not just for them, but also because you did an incredible job. Mr. Chair.